Before you had a name, before you took your first breath, before the world ever saw your face, a complete set of instructions already existed inside you, silently shaping how tall you would grow, the color of your eyes, the sound of your voice, and even the hidden strengths and weaknesses of your body. This code was written long before you made a single choice, stored deep inside every cell, copied with precision, and passed down through generations. Science calls it DNA, a chemical language that builds the body with astonishing accuracy. Yet even with all our microscopes, machines, and knowledge, this code cannot explain why you feel the weight of right and wrong, why injustice bothers you, why beauty moves you, or why, at some quiet moment, you feel that life is more than survival. No strand of DNA can explain why humans search for meaning, why they ask where they came from and where they are going, or why life feels sacred rather than accidental. DNA can tell us how the heart beats, but not why compassion exists. It can describe the brain, but not conscience. It can map the body, but it cannot measure the soul. So the real question is not only what we are made of, but what we are made for. Are we nothing more than biological instructions written in molecules? Or is there something deeper written into us, something beyond chemistry, something that science can observe but not fully explain? It begins with the idea that human beings have always tried to understand life, where it comes from, how it works, and why it exists at all. Two powerful ways humans explore these questions are science and religion. Science looks at life through observation, experiments, measurements, and evidence, while Islam looks at life through revelation, purpose, morality, and the relationship between the creator and the creation. When we compare DNA and science with what Islam teaches about life and creation, the goal is not to create conflict or competition, but to understand how these two approaches speak about the same reality from different angles. Science mainly explains how life works, while Islam explains why life exists and what meaning it carries. Science, by its nature, focuses on the physical and material world. It studies what can be observed, tested, repeated, and measured. Scientific knowledge is always open to revision because new discoveries can improve or correct older ideas. When science studies life, it does not ask whether life has a purpose or moral value. Instead, it asks how living systems function, how traits are passed on, and how complex organisms are built from simple components. This is where DNA becomes one of the most important discoveries in modern biology. DNA is seen as the core information system of life, the chemical code that tells cells how to grow, function, repair themselves, and reproduce. DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, is a molecule found in almost every living organism. It carries genetic information that is passed from parents to children. Structurally, DNA looks like a twisted ladder, often called a double helix. This ladder is made from four basic chemical letters known as bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. These letters pair in a specific way, and their sequence forms instructions, similar to a language or software code. These instructions tell cells how to make proteins, and proteins are the building blocks that create and control the body. From eye color and height to blood type, and some diseases, many characteristics are linked to DNA. From a scientific point of view, DNA explains heredity and biological continuity. Before a cell divides, DNA copies itself so that each new cell receives the same genetic instructions. In reproduction, DNA from both parents combines, creating a unique individual. This discovery helped scientists understand genetics, evolution, medicine, and biotechnology. Through DNA research, humans can diagnose genetic disorders, develop treatments, identify individuals through forensic science, and even modify genes. However, even with all this power, science treats DNA as a neutral mechanism. It does not claim that DNA has intention, awareness, or moral direction. It simply functions according to chemical and physical laws. Islam, on the other hand, approaches life from a very different but complementary direction. Islam teaches that Allah is the creator of all things, including life, matter, and the laws that govern the universe. Life is not accidental or meaningless. It is created with wisdom and purpose. The Quran repeatedly invites human beings to observe nature, reflect on creation, and use their intellect as a sign of gratitude and recognition of the Creator. While the Quran is not a science textbook, it speaks about life, development, and creation in a way that encourages thinking and reflection rather than blind belief. In Islamic teachings, human life is described as a process that begins with a small drop, develops through stages, and is shaped according to divine will. These descriptions focus not on chemical formulas, but on the idea that life develops gradually, under control, and with intention. Islam also teaches that beyond the physical body exists the soul, which gives humans consciousness, moral responsibility, and accountability. Science studies the body and its mechanisms, such as DNA, but the soul is considered beyond the reach of scientific instruments because it belongs to the unseen dimension. One important difference between science and Islam is the type of questions they are designed to answer. Science asks how traits are inherited, how cells function, and how organisms adapt. Islam asks why humans exist, what their responsibilities are, and what happens after death. From an Islamic perspective, DNA can be understood as part of the system Allah created to maintain life and diversity. The complexity and precision of DNA can be seen as a sign of divine design, while science describes the same complexity using chemistry and biology. In this way, science and Islam are not necessarily opposing each other. They operate at different levels. Science explains the mechanism, while Islam explains the meaning behind existence. DNA explains how physical traits are transmitted, while Islam explains that life itself is a trust and a test. Science remains silent on moral purpose, and Islam does not replace scientific investigation. Instead, Islam encourages learning and discovery while reminding humans that knowledge should lead to humility, ethics, and responsibility. DNA, according to science, is the information system of life operating through natural laws and biological processes. According to Islam, life itself, including its systems and laws, originates from Allah and serves a higher purpose beyond the material world. In the next part, this comparison will go deeper by examining Quranic descriptions of creation, how Muslim scholars historically understood heredity and development, and whether modern genetic science creates conflict or harmony with Islamic belief. Now moves deeper into the comparison by looking at how Islam talks about human creation and development, and how these ideas relate to what modern science explains through genetics and DNA. The Quran does not mention DNA by name, because it is a modern scientific discovery, but it does speak about life in a way that focuses on process, order, and intention. The Quran repeatedly reminds humans that they were created in stages, not all at once, and that their development follows a planned sequence. This idea of gradual formation fits well with the scientific understanding that life develops step by step, guided by genetic instructions stored in DNA. One of the most discussed Quranic concepts related to human development is the description of early life beginning from a small drop, often described as nutfa. In scientific terms, this drop contains sperm and egg cells, both of which carry DNA. Each of these cells holds half of the genetic information needed to create a new human being. When they combine, a unique genetic code is formed. From an Islamic perspective, this moment represents the beginning of human creation by the will of Allah, while science describes it as fertilization guided by biological laws. Both perspectives talk about the same event, but explain it using different languages and purposes. The Quran also mentions that human beings are shaped and given form inside the womb. Modern biology explains this shaping through cell division, gene expression, and controlled development, all of which depend on DNA. Genes are turned on and off at specific times, guiding the formation of organs, limbs, and systems. Islam does not describe these microscopic processes, but it emphasizes that nothing in development happens randomly or without knowledge. From an Islamic view, the laws that control DNA activity are themselves created and maintained by Allah, which means scientific explanations do not remove God from the process, but describe the tools through which creation unfolds. Another important concept in Islam is that every human being is created unique. Science supports this idea strongly through genetics. Except for identical twins, no two people share the exact same DNA sequence. Even small differences in DNA lead to differences in appearance, abilities, health, and personality tendencies. Islam teaches that Allah creates humans with diversity in color, language, and form as a sign. Genetics provides the biological explanation for this diversity, while Islam provides the reason, showing that diversity is intentional and meaningful rather than accidental. Islam also teaches that certain traits, strengths, and weaknesses are part of divine wisdom and testing. Science shows that some traits are inherited through genes, while others are shaped by environment and experience. DNA may influence height, metabolism, or risk of certain diseases, but does not fully control a person's choices or moral character. This aligns with Islamic belief in free will. While the body follows biological rules, the human being is still responsible for decisions, intentions, and actions. DNA may shape the physical form, but it does not remove moral accountability. When it comes to inheritance, Islam established clear rules for family lineage, identity, and responsibility long before DNA testing existed. Today, science uses DNA tests to confirm biological relationships, such as parenthood and ancestry. This modern technology supports the Islamic emphasis on preserving lineage and truth in family relations. However, Islam also makes it clear that human value is not based on genetics alone. A person's worth is measured by character, faith, and actions, not by biological inheritance. Another key difference between science and Islam appears when discussing the origin of life itself. Science studies possible natural processes through which life may have emerged, focusing on chemistry and early biological systems. Islam teaches that life originates from Allah's command. These views do not necessarily contradict each other, because science investigates the physical pathway, while Islam speaks about the ultimate source of existence. Science may explain how life develops once it exists, but Islam explains why life exists at all. Islam also introduces the concept of the soul, which is breathed into the human being at a certain stage of development. Science does not deny or confirm the soul. It simply does not have the tools to measure it. DNA explains the physical body, but consciousness, morality, and spiritual awareness cannot be fully reduced to genetic code. From an Islamic perspective, DNA builds the body, while the soul gives it meaning, awareness, and responsibility. As genetic science advances, new ethical questions arise, such as gene editing, cloning, and genetic enhancement. Islam approaches these developments by asking whether they protect life, dignity, and justice. Science can tell us what is possible, but Islam asks what is right. This shows again that science and religion serve different but connected roles. DNA gives humans great power to understand and alter life, but Islam reminds humans that power must be used with humility and ethical limits. By the end of this second part, it becomes clear that Islam and science are not describing two separate realities. They are describing the same reality from two different levels. Science focuses on the visible mechanisms of DNA, genes, and cells, while Islam focuses on purpose, meaning, and accountability. Where science stops at explanation, Islam continues toward wisdom. Where Islam gives meaning, science provides detail. Together, they form a more complete picture of human life. Let's discuss one of the most sensitive and commonly debated areas in the discussion of DNA, science, and Islam, which is the idea of evolution and genetic change over time. In science, evolution is explained as the gradual change in populations of living organisms across generations, driven by genetic variation, mutation, and natural selection. DNA plays a central role in this process because small changes in DNA can lead to differences in traits, and some of these differences may help organisms survive better in their environment. Over long periods of time, these small changes can accumulate and lead to the diversity of life seen today. From a scientific perspective, evolution is not about intention or purpose, but about natural processes acting on genetic information. Mutations occur in DNA, some of which are harmful, some neutral, and a few beneficial. When environmental conditions favor certain traits, organisms carrying those traits are more likely to survive and reproduce, passing their DNA to the next generation. This process explains adaptation and biological diversity without referring to a guiding mind or moral goal. Science focuses strictly on the mechanism, not on meaning. Islam approaches this topic with a different focus. The Quran teaches that Allah is the creator of all living beings and that creation happens according to divine wisdom. Islam does not describe the detailed biological pathways of how different species came to exist, but it clearly states that life is not random or purposeless. Some Muslim scholars accept the idea that organisms can change and adapt over time within limits, because this does not conflict with the belief that Allah created the laws of nature. In this view, genetic variation and adaptation are part of the system Allah designed. The main area of disagreement usually appears when evolution is extended to human origins. Science proposes that humans share common ancestry with other living organisms, based on similarities in DNA, anatomy, and fossils. Islam teaches that Adam was created by Allah in a special way and given a unique status. Different Muslim thinkers interpret this in different ways. Some reject human evolution completely, seeing Adam as a direct and separate creation. Others suggest that Allah could have used a process of development, guided by divine will, to bring about the human form while still honoring the special creation of Adam. What unites these views is the belief that human dignity, moral responsibility, and the soul come from Allah, not from DNA alone. DNA comparisons show strong similarities between humans and other species, which science uses as evidence for common ancestry. Islam does not deny similarity in physical design, because all life comes from the same creator. Similar design does not necessarily mean shared origin in a purely material sense. It can also reflect shared purpose or efficient creation. From an Islamic perspective, similarity in DNA highlights unity in creation, while science interprets it as biological relatedness. Another important point is that evolution in science does not explain the origin of consciousness, moral awareness, or spiritual understanding. DNA can influence brain development, but it cannot fully explain why humans seek meaning, justice, and worship. Islam explains these qualities through the soul and divine guidance. This shows a clear boundary between what genetics can explain and what remains beyond material analysis. Islam also emphasizes that humans are not simply advanced animals. Even if biological similarities exist, humans are given knowledge, moral choice, and responsibility. DNA may shape the body, but it does not define the value of a person. This idea protects human dignity from being reduced to genetic success or evolutionary advantage. Science measures survival and reproduction, while Islam measures righteousness and accountability. Modern genetics also shows that genetic change has limits. Not all mutations lead to improvement, and many cause disease or dysfunction. This challenges the popular idea that evolution always moves toward progress. Islam teaches that creation is balanced and purposeful, not a blind march toward perfection. This balance fits with the scientific observation that stability is just as important as change in living systems. As science continues to study DNA and evolution, Islam encourages Muslims to engage with this knowledge thoughtfully rather than fearfully. Learning about genetics can increase appreciation for the complexity of life and the precision of creation. At the same time, Islam reminds believers not to turn scientific theories into absolute truths about meaning and purpose. Science describes patterns, but it does not define ultimate reality. The comparison becomes clearer. Science uses DNA to explain change, diversity, and adaptation through natural processes. Islam explains that all processes exist under divine knowledge and control. Where science sees chance and selection, Islam sees wisdom and intention. These perspectives differ in explanation, but do not have to cancel each other out. Instead, they describe different layers of the same world. Modern genetics has given humanity immense power. Through technologies such as gene editing, genetic screening, cloning experiments, and biotechnology, humans can influence traits, prevent certain diseases, and alter biological processes. Science views these abilities as tools, neutral in themselves, whose value depends on how they are used. DNA, in this sense, becomes a resource that can be studied, adjusted, and controlled to some extent. From an Islamic perspective, power over nature comes with responsibility and moral limits. Islam teaches that humans are not owners of life, but caretakers. Life is a trust given by Allah, and humans are accountable for how they use their knowledge and abilities. While Islam strongly encourages seeking knowledge and curing disease, it also warns against arrogance and crossing ethical boundaries. Changing DNA to treat illness and reduce suffering can be seen as permissible when it preserves life and dignity, but altering genetics for vanity, harm, or unjust advantage raises serious moral concerns. One important ethical issue is genetic screening and testing. Science uses DNA tests to detect inherited diseases, predict health risks, and guide medical decisions. Islam generally supports such knowledge when it helps prevent harm and allows informed choices, especially in marriage and family planning, as long as it is handled with honesty, privacy, and compassion. However, Islam strongly rejects discrimination based on genetic traits. A person's worth is not reduced by illness, disability, or genetic difference. DNA may describe physical conditions, but it does not define human value. Gene editing, especially technologies that can change DNA in embryos, presents deeper ethical questions. Science asks whether such changes are safe and effective, while Islam asks whether they alter creation in a way that violates divine limits. Some Islamic scholars distinguish between restoring normal function and enhancing traits beyond natural limits. Correcting a harmful mutation may be seen as healing, while designing physical or intellectual traits for preference risks turning human life into a product. Islam emphasizes humility, reminding humans that not everything that is possible is permitted. Cloning is another area where DNA science challenges traditional views of life. From a scientific perspective, cloning demonstrates that DNA contains the instructions needed to create a biological copy. From an Islamic view, cloning raises questions about identity, lineage, family structure, and human dignity. Even if a cloned body could exist, Islam teaches that each human soul is unique and created by Allah. This means that even identical DNA does not create the same person. The soul, not DNA, defines true individuality. Modern genetics also raises concerns about control and inequality. If DNA technology is used only by the wealthy, it could deepen social injustice. Islam strongly emphasizes justice and equality. Knowledge should benefit humanity as a whole, not create new forms of oppression. Science can provide the means, but Islam provides the ethical direction, ensuring that progress does not come at the cost of compassion or fairness. Another key point is the danger of genetic determinism, the idea that DNA completely controls who a person is or will become. Science itself now recognizes that genes interact with environment, choices, and experiences. Islam goes further by clearly rejecting the idea that humans are prisoners of biology. While DNA influences the body, humans are responsible for their actions. Moral failure cannot be excused by genetics, and moral excellence is possible regardless of biological limits. This reinforces the Islamic belief in free will and accountability. Islam also reminds humans that knowledge should lead to humility. The deeper science goes into DNA, the more complex life appears. This complexity should not lead to pride, but to reflection. The Quran repeatedly encourages humans to think, learn, and observe, but also warns against forgetting their place in creation. Science explains the details of how DNA works, but Islam reminds humans that understanding does not equal ownership or absolute control. By this stage of the comparison, it becomes clear that science and Islam are deeply connected in practical life. Science provides the tools to understand and modify DNA, while Islam provides the moral framework to guide how those tools should be used. When science moves without ethics, it risks harm. When religion ignores knowledge, it risks stagnation. Together, they offer balance. After examining biological mechanisms, creation, evolution, ethics, and responsibility, it becomes clear that science and Islam are not competing explanations of reality, but complementary ways of understanding it. Science explains the physical structure and function of life through DNA, while Islam explains the meaning, purpose, and moral direction of life. When each is kept within its proper limits, conflict disappears and clarity emerges. DNA, from a scientific point of view, is an extraordinary system of information. It carries instructions that allow life to exist, continue, and adapt. The more scientists study DNA, the more they discover layers of complexity, regulation, and precision. This complexity does not answer questions about why life matters, why humans seek meaning, or why moral values exist. Science does not deny these questions, it simply does not address them. Islam steps into this space by explaining that life is a deliberate creation, guided by wisdom, and given purpose beyond survival and reproduction. Islam teaches that knowledge is a form of worship when it leads to humility and service. Studying DNA can strengthen faith rather than weaken it, because it reveals how finely balanced and carefully ordered life is. From an Islamic perspective, the laws that govern DNA are not independent of God, but are part of the system Allah created and maintains. Discovering these laws does not replace belief. It deepens understanding of creation. Science describes the script of life, while Islam explains the author behind it. At the same time, Islam warns against turning scientific knowledge into absolute truth about existence. DNA can explain physical traits and biological processes, but it cannot explain love, justice, beauty, sacrifice, or worship. Reducing human beings to genetic machines strips life of meaning. Islam protects human dignity by affirming that every person has a soul, moral responsibility, and a destiny beyond this world. DNA builds the body, but it does not define the human essence. The future of genetics will likely bring even greater power, from advanced gene therapies to deeper understanding of human biology. Islam does not oppose progress, but insists that progress must serve humanity rather than control it. Ethical guidance becomes even more important as scientific ability grows. Islam provides principles such as protection of life, justice, compassion, and accountability, which can guide genetic research toward beneficial outcomes. Science asks what can be done, while Islam asks what should be done. For students and learners, this comparison offers an important lesson. Knowledge does not have to be divided into religious and scientific camps. A Muslim can study DNA, genetics, and biology with confidence, knowing that discovering how life works does not contradict belief in God. At the same time, faith provides a moral compass that science alone cannot supply. This balance encourages curiosity without arrogance and belief without ignorance. In the end, DNA stands as one of the greatest scientific discoveries of modern times, revealing the hidden language of life. Islam stands as a timeless guide, reminding humans why life exists and how it should be lived. When science and Islam are understood together, they form a complete view of human existence, where knowledge and meaning support each other rather than clash. Science explains the visible, Islam explains the invisible, and both together help humans understand who they are, where they come from, and how they should live. After exploring DNA through science and life through Islam, one clear lesson stands out. Conflict only arises when science is asked to answer questions it was never designed to answer, or when religion is forced to operate as a laboratory science. Islam teaches that humans are more than bodies shaped by genes. They're moral beings entrusted with choice and responsibility. This understanding ensures that scientific progress does not erase compassion, dignity, or justice. As humanity moves forward into a future shaped by genetic knowledge, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology, the need for ethical guidance becomes even more urgent. Science will continue to expand what humans can do, but it cannot decide why or whether certain actions should be taken. Islam provides a moral lens through which power can be guided toward benefit rather than harm. This balance ensures that DNA remains a tool for healing and understanding, not a means of control or exploitation. For students and learners, this complete comparison offers confidence rather than confusion. One can study biology deeply, appreciate genetic science fully, and still hold strong faith. There is no need to choose between the laboratory and belief, because they address different dimensions of the same reality. Science teaches how life functions. Islam teaches how life should be lived. Together, they answer both the questions of the mind and the questions of the soul. In conclusion, DNA represents the language of the body, written in molecules and codes, while Islam represents the guidance of the soul, written in meaning and purpose. Science reveals the script of life, and Islam reveals the reason for the script. When understood together, they do not contradict each other, but complete the picture of human existence. This harmony between knowledge and belief is not a weakness of either side, but a strength that allows humanity to grow in understanding without losing its moral direction.